Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to the Vinnie Langdon Show podcast edition. Today, my guest is Jason Hartless, who is currently the drummer for Ted Nugent. What's up, Jason? How are you?
Hey, man, how's it going?
It's going. So, where are you at today? Are you currently on the road or hanging out?
No, actually, I'm home in beautiful Detroit, Michigan. Been off the road. We finished up the 2018 Ted Nugent tour last Monday, so been home for about a week, finally catching up on things after being on the road for almost 2 months.
Nice to be back in your own bed, right?
Absolutely.
There you go. So first off, for all the listeners out there, you came into the world at a very early age playing the drums. And when I say an early age playing the drums, I'm not talking about elementary school or high school. I'm talking about when you were in diapers, man, banging on those drums, right?
Yeah, I pretty much started playing, professionally when I was about 5. And, my dad was a professional musician and, drummer, so the drums were always in the house. And, about the time I was 6 months old, I'd kind of start banging away on the kit and, just tinkering with things. And then by the time I was 3, I started playing a full kit. And, around that time, my dad also, called some of his, musician buddies around Detroit and, come over and just jam with me, give me some experience playing with other musicians. And so, fast forward to about 5 is when I played my first professional gig, doing cover gigs around Detroit.
That's amazing. So it's kind of like you learned how to play the drums before you were learning the ABCs and how to count, huh?
Yeah, right. I was learning how to count music.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. So like you said, growing up, your father was locally involved in, the music scene there, playing drums. You had his friends come over and kind of give you pointers and playing shows, and kind of you were, early ahead, get a good start and kind of were accustomed to, not just rock and roll music, but different all types of genres, right?
Yeah, my dad is one of those guys that, listens to everything. So, I was always enthralled in many, many different genres and styles and artists. So, it was always kind of one of those things that kind of became ingrained in my brain when I was learning music.
Yeah, that's good to be, diverse and learn it all. So now, for my listeners who do not know, you've been working with Ted Nugent and his band for the past few years now, but taking it back, that wasn't, he wasn't the first star you actually worked with. In fact, your father had a good relationship with Richie Scarlett, who played with, Ace Frehley, and he actually kind of made him your godfather, right?
Yeah, my dad is very much one of those. He's a salesman, so he's a very natural talker and builds relationships extremely easy. So when his band was touring, they used to tour a lot with Ace Frehley back in the early '90s, and so my dad became real close friends with Ace and Richie. And then around the time I was born, my dad made Richie my godfather, and when Ace rejoined Kiss in '96, I think it was '95, '96, Richie went to playing bass for Mountain. Now, I was a big fan of Mountain when I was little, and just loved Corky Lang and loved the music, and it was one of the bands that I kind of cut my teeth on playing to. And when I started playing, these cover gigs when I was about 5, we used to play Nantucket Sleigh Ride by Mountain. So my dad filmed a video of me playing it, live, and sent it to Richie, and Richie ended up giving it to Corky Lang, drummer of Mountain, who then called my dad and was like, I'd love to work with this kid. And, Corky, who was living in Toronto at the time, he would drive back and forth from Toronto to Detroit, and we would sit in a studio for, hours with 2 drum sets and just woodshed. And then, that was pretty much from the time I was 7 to about 10 years old. And around that time, we started doing like a little solo record project of mine, but really the only reason that record was even done was basically to give an excuse for Corky to mentor me through a recording session, teach me how to work in a studio, what it takes to be a professional, and all that fun stuff.
Right. And are you talking about the First Division, that project?
Yep. It was very, very military based and, themed, and Corky pretty much wrote all the songs, but him and I kind of very collaborated because again, at that point I'd never wrote a song in my life. So, it was very much a hand-holding type situation because I was only, 7, 8, 9 years old when we were doing the bulk of the recording and writing for that record. So, great times. And it's funny because I've seen today in the news there was the 15th anniversary today of the East Coast blackout. And we were actually in the studio cutting vocal tracks for that record when the blackout happened.
Oh, man. Could imagine, huh? Everyone kind of in a frantic going, uh-oh, I hope that's saved, right?
No, see, that's still, even though it wasn't that long ago, it was still in the days of ADAT tapes and radar machines. So unfortunately, it fried one of the radar machines that the studio had.
Oh, ouch. But hey, more practice in the studio and more experience time, and it all came together successfully. And nowadays, do you ever look back and say, I want to just sit down and listen to when I was 10 years old? And do you ever listen to yourself playing again?
It's one of those things that I reminisce sometimes. I like to kind of go back and listen to tracks that I've done in the past and whether it be that record or any other sessions I've done with various artists, just to kind of see where my head was at that time, and if my playing has changed, did I maybe forget about a certain technique or something that I was doing. So I always like to kind of go back and relive and kind of listen to those old tracks. So it's kind of cool.
Now, we know you're a big fan and you love Pearl drums, and let me ask you, why Pearl? Was it something you started at an early age? And
yeah, the kit that I learned how to play on was my dad's late '80s Pearl World Series kit, and then my first drum set that I ever had was a 2000 Pearl Export kit, and I've always used Pearl my whole life, but when I got older, I started listening to different drums, and I just always came back to Pearl, and now it's become a hobby of mine. I collect vintage Pearl drums, mainly in the 60s and 70s, and I've kind of become a drum hoarder, if you if you will, and but Pearl endorsed me as an artist in 2005 when I was only 10. So I've been with these guys for many, many years. So they've all become like family to me. So it's become more than just the drums at this point.
yeah, that's very cool. Now, you just did another tour with Ted's band and recorded for the third time, so very comfortable working with him and his guys. And I heard you tracked your upcoming album with Ted under 5 hours. That's crazy fast.
Yeah. Well, because really me as a player, I'm conventionally a studio musician. I tour a lot, but I do more session work than I do touring work. And, being with Ted as his touring drummer for the last 3 years, he hadn't been in the studio since I've been in the band. So, coming into the session, it was very much like, Ted wanted his band on the record. So it was us as a three-piece, and, we're tight. We played together for a number of years, so it made sense to just bring us onto the record. And Ted didn't really, and even the bass player, Greg Smith, didn't really realize, how much of a studio rat I really am. And because I approach every single situation that I do completely different. And, like with this record, I came into the session not as Jason Hartless, the drummer for Ted Nugent, but Jason Hartless, the session musician on Ted Nugent's new record. Because, session and touring work are completely different. So if you approach, recording session like you would as if you're playing a live show, it's not going to come across the same way. And, we were slotted to do that record in 2 weeks in Waco, Texas. And we went down there. We had 2 days to sit in a room, us three, just, learn the tunes and work out the parts. And then the rest of the time was to set aside to record. And initially it was to be, we were going to track one song a day, drums, bass, and rhythm guitar, and then finish that song that day. But when we sat down and started tracking, it just, the feeling was right. Ted was loving it. So we ended up recording drums, bass, and rhythm guitar in 5 hours.
Wow, that's amazing. So it's kind of like, okay, now, hey, we got another week and a half or 2 weeks. You guys want to record another album while we're at it, right?
Right. Well, I mean, really, the nice thing about this record, and what I've been telling a lot of people, is it goes back to the old school way of recording, and the fact that we weren't rushed, we're not pressured to get it done. We had 2 weeks, but once we tracked everything, then it was like, we had all the time in the world now. Sure. And really, what that allowed us to do was kind of sit back and really dig into the songs and experiment and try different things, and it really allowed us to, again, go back to this old school way of recording, because, it was relatively all one takes, and there wasn't a lot of overdubs, but there was a lot of experimentation. Added percussion, different bass parts. We ended up doing a acoustic version of Ted's iconic song "Fred Bear," and initially there was only supposed to be guitar and vocals on it. But, now that we had all this extra time, myself and the bass player started experimenting, and we ended up adding all this percussion on it, and Greg played a fretless bass on it. So, again, having now all this free time allowed us to experiment and try different things, and, I'm really, really excited about this record.
That's very cool. And do we have an estimated time when it's going to drop out, or a name for it?
I don't know the confirmed drop date, but I've been hearing sometime late this month, and sometimes even into September. But, who knows? Especially in this industry, things change all the time. So, but for sure, it should be out late summer, early fall.
Very cool. Exciting. Now, besides music, do you have another talent that, your friends or family would consider you're good at?
I honestly, I golf my entire life in music, and that's everything that I do and love, and every single thing I'm involved in, it has some sort of tie to music. And really, the only outlet that I have in music is I'm a huge hockey fan, and love following hockey, and other than that, I'm a studio musician, recording engineer. I run a music conglomerate and go to school full time for music business. So it's just a passion that keeps me driving to go 100% with everything.
Hey, I can see it now. The Winter Classic. There's Jason Hartless playing drums. We're at the Stanley Cup in front of millions of people. How cool would that be, right?
Oh yeah, that's definitely my dream gig.
There you go. Fantastic. So right now we're letting some of the viewers take a look at some clips and live footage that you provided with us from various shows with Ted over the past couple of years, and you definitely look like you're having fun, and every city's a different adventure. And do you have a pet peeve that most drummers tend to do these days, where you're thinking, man, drummers got to stop doing that, twirling their sticks a certain way or anything?
Well, every single artist I play with, it's a different situation. Me as a player, I prefer going the route of concentrating on playing first before the shows gets in the way. But there has been certain times where I've had to play with an artist that stick twirls and all that crap has gotten involved. But in terms of pet peeves, my drum tech will laugh, but I love, at least I'm very, very meticulous about how my drums are tuned and set up and stuff like that. So, I guess that's really my only real pet peeve.
Before we go, one last thing we want to help you promote is that if someone's watching you and they're like, man, the drums are so difficult, they look so challenging to play. You've played them all your life, you kind of mastered them to an extent, and you also give private drum lessons out there from basically anywhere in the world now with modern technology, Skype. And if anyone's interested, they just, go to your official website and they can sign up, contact you?
Yeah, when I'm now home from touring, I actually am a music director at a School of Rock facility in Metro Detroit. So that definitely keeps me busy teaching. But also, I just started working with this new internet Skype database, like interface or something called Meet Hook. Which a lot of legendary musicians and up and coming musicians are on there, for private lessons. So just started to get involved with that whole thing. So if you're ever looking for Skype lessons or anything like that, you can find me on that site.
Fantastic. So jasonhartless.com. And what's next for you? Some solo work, or are you still working with Ted on an upcoming project, or what's going on?
You know, I've never had a besides that record. You know, I did with Corky when I was young. I've never had the desire to become a solo artist. You know, I love being the quote unquote hired gun musician. You know, because everybody I play with, every session I do, it's completely different. So it keeps it fresh. You know, everything from rock to jazz to funk to reggae to anything. You know, it's being able to branch yourself out into different genres and styles is really fun. And it's funny. I've been telling the story to a couple people, but earlier this year I was on tour with Joe Turner, who was a singer of Rainbow and Deep Purple, and we did like a 3-day run. It was like Detroit, Chicago, St. Louis, and then the day after the tour, I was to fly back home to Detroit to do a big band Christmas album with some of Bob Seger guys from Bob Seger's horn section. So I go from classic rock metal from the 80s to this big band Christmas album. And that right there is just what makes my job so fun is being able to branch out into many different horizons like that, and try different things, play different things, and always keeps it fresh.
Yeah, that is awesome. Well, Jason Hartless, thanks for being on the Vinnie Langdon Show today. Visit jasonhartless.com if you guys want to learn more about him, and be sure to head over to vinnielangdonshow.com for more interviews and performances. And Jason, hopefully we'll catch you at a show soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for the time. Great talking.